All right. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Entreprenudist podcast, the place to hear real entrepreneurs and business owners bear it all. Emphasis on the real. We have today a special guest, and as we start every episode when we're interviewing somebody, please tell people who are you and what do you do?
Hey, well, thanks for having me on your show so far. It's a great honor to be here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm Cameron Bishop. I currently work as an investment banker for what are called lower middle market business owners. So we're affiliated with a FINRA registered broker dealer. Our firm Raincatcher is based out of Denver, Colorado. However, I work out of Kansas City. And we specialize in working with businesses that have generally $1 million to $10 million in EBITDA profits. This is a market sector that has been tremendously underserved by the business brokerage and investment banking communities in the past because these companies are generally too big to be really well represented by what's referred to as a Main Street business broker, and they're just too small for the big investment banks. So we decided to focus on this lower sector because there is meaningful value for these business owners here. And as baby boomers continue to age out, I think the statistic is 10,000 of them turn age 65 every day. Many of them are business owners, and the vast majority of them in this day and age don't have children who want to enter their business. And because their company is usually their greatest source of potential net worth, then when it's time to kind of kick back or retire or work a little less, they're only left with the option of trying to sell. So we help them there when it's time to sell. And we do that in just about every industry you can think of, from high-tech SaaS platform software companies to business services, heavy construction, some work in the food industry. We're pretty much across the board. And these business owners really need that help in order to extract a maximum value for their company.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because for whatever reason, majority of businesses don't sell. And a lot of it is, as you say, a lot of people either don't know or they don't want to know that their kids have no interest in being in their business. I talk to a lot of business owners, and they always talk as if the child is going to take over the business. And of course, the profits earned from that business is going to support them in retirement. But when you ask them explicitly, have you ever asked your child if they want your business? The answer is usually no.
You are just spot on. In fact, before becoming an investment banker, I spent 5 years as a partner in a boutique consulting firm specializing in working with small company business owners, family-owned companies, doing what's referred to as exit and transition planning. So helping them groom the company for a future sale in which they could get a maximum value or even make the company sellable at all. And that very conversation with their children was something we had to bring up. And it was often a surprise to them. But we've also seen cases where the kids agree to go into the business, but then once they're in there, they realize that this is just not for them. And the parent, the business owner, is left with oftentimes a more difficult choice and kind of a last minute decision as opposed to a pre-planned decision on how to get value out of the company.
So it seems like it's better to be proactive than reactive because, yeah, those last minute decisions can hurt. And I've also seen the other way around where the child had no interest in being in the business at all. But once they work with a company like yours and the business is finally organized, all of a sudden, the child always wanted to be in the business. What do you mean I didn't want the business? Of course I wanted it after you worked with Cameron Bishop and his team. And once you got everything organized, of course I want it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. But one of the smartest things that I have seen business owners do over time, and to backtrack a second, I spent 35 years of my career doing what are called leverage roll-ups for private equity firms. So we would buy a large platform company then we would go out and acquire much smaller strategic acquisitions called tuck-ins to roll into that business. And the classic example is we bought a division of a company, and the father was a very wise guy. And he said, look, part of the deal is I would like for my son, to come and work for you for at least 2 years, involved with the properties that we had acquired. Really smart kid. He ended up staying for, I think, 4 years, but then he went back to fulfill a senior role in his father's company. So he had exposure to, we were a much larger company with a lot more disciplines and organizational structure and processes in place. So he was able to take those best practices back to his father's company and ultimately ran it and worked out a deal with his father to buy his father out. And that was a great ending for that business. And the father was just very wise to require his son to get business exposure someplace else besides in his own company.
Yeah, and that wisdom was probably even better, because a lot of times people think our company, especially if it's a family-owned business, how come we're the only ones building our plane while flying it? How come we're the ones putting out fires every day? Then you go to another company and we're like, okay, everybody's putting out fires every day.
Yeah, you are, again, spot on. So there's two situations we see, and you mentioned it earlier. The statistics are, I think, it came out of, I've seen it written in Forbes magazine, and I think Pepperdine University has done some research in their business school that says something like 70 to 80% of companies that try to sell never sell. And there are a few reasons for that. And I used to teach a course for the Small Business Administration at a local university, really focused on small companies, entrepreneurial companies, and startups. And one of the things that I really tried to drive home was, if you start a company, you need an exit strategy in mind when you start the company. And every time I taught that class, there was a deer in the headlights look on these small business owners who were in that room, because that had never occurred to them. They were solely focused on the front end of the business. And then the other challenge for them is that we see all the time, and it's human nature. They start and run a company. If it's successful and financially doing well, they're focused on running the company for income or annual profit distributions, and usually legal income tax avoidance. But they don't think about running their company from the standpoint of creating business value for the future, for whatever kind of exit they're going to have. So they spend at least 95% of their time working in their business. And if they're lucky, they spend 5% of it working on the business to grow it and develop it to create true business value. There's some real differences in the strategy of managing a company for one reason versus the other.
Yeah, they say the time to think about your exit is before you start, right?
Exactly.
So how do people overcome these roadblocks? Because, the statistics are what they are. Most businesses don't sell. And a lot of business owners, when they actually finally do ask their children, they don't want the business for whatever reason. How do you overcome these roadblocks?
So that is the perfect question. And that's part of my mission and passion, is to share this information with business owners, because it's really sad when I have to tell a business owner that for various reasons your company is not sellable today. So I'll go into the top 5 of those, which we see all the time. But on the other side of the coin, when they are wise enough to engage with us as professional representation to sell their company, and that's true for other professional lower middle market investment banks or sophisticated brokers, it's certainly not just us, but we love it when they come to us, is how we extract maximum value based on the criteria and dynamics of the company. But back to the front end of the process, we see way too many business owners that literally just wake up one morning and say, it's time to sell. But the perfect world is they should be starting 2 or 3 years in advance. And the factors that we see most often that impact sellability is first and foremost is really bad or no professional accounting. I can't tell you the number of businesses we see where we can't tell if they're sellable. And I'll give you one quick example of this, a real world story. Had business owners that manufactured super high tech test equipment for the automotive industry. They had like 7 patents. They were doing $6 or $7 million a year in revenue. And when they first approached us, we always say, well, why do you want to sell? And the husband was a engineer, and he just wanted to focus on engineering. And so the next question is, okay, tell me a little bit about your revenues and profits. And she said, well, we're doing 6 or 7 million revenue, and we're doing about 1.5 million in profit. Well, one of my partners here at Raincatcher, he's a licensed CPA and spent 15 years in the audit practice with KPMG. So we signed an NDA for them. We asked them to send us their last 3 years of financials. He goes over them with a fine-tooth comb, reformats them if necessary to be GAAP compliant. And when it was all said and done, they did not know how to properly book raw materials in inventory or inventory and work in progress. And not only were they not making 1.5 million, but they were quite literally a break-even business. So at that stage, they weren't going to be sellable. So those are some of the examples that we see with fundamental flaws in accounting. And that's something that really is worth the investment for these business owners, and to handle it historically and not just the year you're thinking about selling.
So fundamental flaws in accounting, which definitely, because it doesn't matter what you say, and it doesn't even matter if you get a letter of intent. Once you get to that due diligence stage, once they start looking over those financials, that could kill it, because it's not about how much you're bringing in, it's how much based off your structure are you keeping, and can we continue it on if we purchase this business?
Amen. Exactly right. And they might think that their numbers are correct or okay, but any buyer for a business in this day and age, especially if they're going to require bank financing, they're going to do what's called a buy-side quality of earnings on the financials of that company. And it's a very deep, detailed discovery process of those financials. And if they run into anomalies, they're going to do one of two things. They may walk, or they may completely restructure their deal or deeply discount the price. And then they're going to be suspicious of other areas of this if they see some fundamental flaws in the accounting for that company. So yeah, you can't hide from it. It's if there are errors, they're going to get found. And so it's far better to have all of that addressed and cleaned up and handled professionally on the front end. It's worth the investment to have competent either fractional CFOs, if you're not big enough to have a full-time one, or a controller, or a really reputable outside accounting or bookkeeping firm.
Okay, so that's one. Don't just wake up in the morning deciding that you want to sell your business. It sounds like what you're saying is every business owner should assume that it's because, it's good to have options. Every business owner should assume that even if they feel like they will never sell their business, even if they feel like they want to die with their shoes on, they should still see the benefit of having the option. And in order to have that option, that means bringing on good, reputable accountants earlier, sooner than later.
So there's about 5 or 6 of these things. So accounting is number one. Number two is what is referred to as owner dependency. So if that business is successful almost solely because of the business owner, because he or she has all the critical knowledge to run the company, especially if he or she is the key point of contact for customer relationships, and if they have no successor that could step into their shoes, that's called owner dependency. And that's a case where many buyers will walk away because they don't like the risk, or they're going to require that owner to stay on as either a consultant or an employee for an extended period of time for proper knowledge transfer and while a successor is trained. And generally that's not ideal for the business owner because they usually reach a point where they want to sell because they want to begin to step away or get out of the business or, reduce their workload. So it becomes counterproductive for them from that standpoint. So having proper succession planning and an understanding of delegation to other members of your team help reduce that dependency. And one of the key, sounds kind of funny, but litmus test is if the owner can go on extended vacations and the business continues to run properly and thrive, that's a good sign that the business isn't solely dependent on that business owner.
Oh yeah, and I've heard. I'm definitely not a fan of this, but I've heard what some people do. Let's say that they're interested in buying a company and they want to help. They want to ensure that the company that they're looking into buying isn't owner dependent. A lot of times what they do is they change meetings at the last minute in order to see if that owner is able to make these last minute changes. And if they can make these last minute changes, that means that they're not in their business. But if they're unable to, that means that this company is more dependent than the current owner wants to make known. Have you seen that type of gamesmanship when it comes to buyers and sellers?
Oh, yeah, you do. But again, any smart buyer who's going to be spending their own personal money and, maybe bank money, they're going to do deep diligence. A lot of that involves face-to-face meetings with that business owner and what his roles and responsibilities are. They will look at organizational charts to see who else in the company is there and what their roles are. So you can kind of run, but you really can't hide from that. Not with buyers in this day and age, and not with the demands. Again, if they're going to require like SBA financing or some other type of public bank financing or private financing, those banks require a tremendous amount of front-end due diligence to make a decision to loan money on that business. And that all drives that whole very detailed due diligence process.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So sounds like definitely get reputable accountants sooner than later. Also sounds like you need to set up your company in a manner to where it's not solely dependent on you, because if a company does determine that your company is dependent on you, that doesn't always kill the deal, but it might have it to where they might have some type of buyout instead of an outright purchase. What's your preference on that when it comes to the buyout versus the outright purchases?
Well, we don't see many outright buyouts. So business owners always think that, I'm going to sell my company. It's going to be worth X million dollars, and I'm going to find a buyer, and they're just going to write me a check or wire transfer that amount of money into my bank account. But in this day and age, I don't think I've worked on a deal in the last 5 years where that happened. In almost every case, there is some kind of what's referred to as a seller note, where the seller carries back a loan for part of the purchase price, and those are usually structured in a 3-year to 5-year time frame with market-based interest rates and different payout structures. Some deals where there's a lot of future business, you see what are called earn-outs, where we're going to give you a total value of the business, but over the next 1 year, 2 year, or 3 years, you're going to get increments of that based on the company's financial performance. And in a lot of cases with some of these bigger deals, especially if it's a private equity buyer, they're going to want that business owner to roll over equity in the new company, which means they're going to take part of that purchase price as equity in what's referred to as the new co. So you just don't see cases where everybody says, let's say the company's worth $1 million. Nobody's writing up a check for $1 million. There's other elements to that structure that are part of that purchase process.
And it's a lot. Sounds like it's a lot of moving parts. A lot of essentially, you're setting yourself up to, of course, get a big payday, but you're also set yourself up for somebody to call your baby ugly, right? Nobody wants their baby to be called ugly. Is there nothing that a business owner can do, either on the seller side or the buyer side, to prepare themselves psychologically for this type of engagement?
Well, you can to a certain degree, and when we sign up a new client, one of our first conversations is a real heart-to-heart conversation about this process of selling a business. First of all, it's a lengthy process. The national average, no matter what size the company, except for maybe smaller deals like a local liquor store or a restaurant maybe, this is a 9-month process on average. And selling your company is literally a full-time job on top of your full-time job. It's an emotional roller coaster ride. It's very high stress. And that's where one of the values of somebody like us at Raincatcher comes into play, because I've had on occasion needed to talk my clients down off of the ledge because they were just so stressed out about the whole thing. They didn't know if they could continue, and they have the potential to become their own worst enemy. But there's a lot of very complex vocabulary concepts, especially around what's called net working capital, which is your balance sheet, where a professional navigates that for you. And again, even as I describe different deal structures, an investment banker kind of leads the charge on how to get that deal structured and negotiated properly. A lot of business owners think they can go it alone, and it's possible to do, but you're generally penny wise and pound foolish. And if you don't understand the complexities of how deals are generally structured on what's called a cash-free, debt-free net working capital basis, if somebody says they're paying you $5 million for your company, but the way they have negotiated the cash on a balance sheet, the receivables, the payables, any debt you might have on the business, inventory, if you're selling real estate, they can end up having a realized outcome far less than what it looks like on the surface because of the way the balance sheet factors were or were not negotiated. And if they don't understand that, they can have circles run around them. When I was doing leverage roll-ups, I bought about 50 companies for private equity firms and spent about a little over $500 million. And I saw so many cases where these business owners tried to go it alone, and they didn't go into an auction environment. And buyers love nothing more to be in a non-competitive environment, because that means that seller hasn't benchmarked what their true business value is. They don't really know. And the market sets the value for any company. So we never paid top dollar for any business that we acquired that was not in a competitive auction environment and not represented by professional either business brokers or investment bankers. And they always left money on the table because they didn't know how to properly structure their company to obtain maximum valuation. And again, a good investment banker helps them do that on the front end of their process.
So, all right. So sounds like the best way for someone to prepare themselves psychologically, whether it's on the buyer side or the seller side, is to hire a specialist sooner than later.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because, at the end of the day, it's a pure business transaction. But as you said, you don't want anybody calling your baby ugly. And, when that kind of thing happens, if some buyer makes a critical comment about some element of your business, this company is these owners is pride and joy. They eat, sleep, breathe it, and they've done it for many times decades. So they let emotions get in the way instead of making smart business decisions. And that's, again, where an outside representative who views this as a business transaction and doesn't have skin in the game from the emotional standpoint of the vested interest of the owner, it's all in their favor to have someone to work with like that through the process. So we kind of laugh about it. Everybody thinks an investment banker is somebody who deals with numbers and dollars and shrewd negotiations and contracts, and all that is true. But oftentimes, about 50% of what we do is what I kind of refer to as Dr. Phil work, where we're just, helping our client, advising our client, counseling them through this process. And a good banker works with them from beginning to end, from signing that engagement until a wire transfer hits their bank account. They're on calls with the lawyers. We can help refer proper M&A attorneys, tax specialists, and we oftentimes help put a lot of these complicated legal concepts into layman's terms for our clients, because it can be very intimidating for them. And about 95% of our clients have never sold a business before, so they don't really understand a lot of the factors around this. So we help them through that process all the way along.
Yeah, because it's one of those things to where usually one of the reasons why entrepreneurs are successful in their own right is when you look back through their narrative, they went through against the grain. A lot of entrepreneurs that I encounter are first generation entrepreneurs, sometimes second generation entrepreneurs, and they've gone against the grain and did their own thing for so many decades, and that's what got them to where they are. It's sometimes hard to transition to, all right, I need to align myself with an institution that actually puts me almost the first time in their career, not against the grain, following the rules, as they say, in order to get it sold right. Is it hard to switch that mindset of, yes, you did everything on your own. Yes, you did everything against the grain. But this right here, you need a team and you need to follow certain established standards.
Yep, it is. And what I try to preach and counsel for these business owners is, and this was one of my philosophies running companies, that I helped build a company from 7 million in revenue to 400 million. And then I went out on my own entrepreneurially and spent a year shopping my business plan with private equity, and ultimately landed with JP Morgan Chase Bank's private equity group. And we built another business from zero revenue on my kitchen table to about 120 million. And in running those companies, one of my key philosophies was, know what you know how to do and do it well. Know what you don't know how to do well and hire experts to do it for you. And that's the switch we try to get to flip for these business owners. In the entrepreneurial world, a lot of times they have to wear many hats. They're not specialized like professionals in much larger companies are. So that can be a difficult switch for them to flip, to understand how to leverage the expertise of outside professionals to kind of shore up where they don't have experience or the knowledge.
Okay, so I'm a business owner. I got an accountant. I didn't just wake up the morning and say I wanted to sell. I've been working with a reputable accounting company for the past 2 to 3 years. I've also I've had the conversation with my children. We know exactly what we're doing. I'm working now. I'm looking for a professional. So before I get to that professional, I have to first decide that I want to sell. Is there no trigger that a business owner should look for in order to determine, all right, it's time to sell?
Wow, that's a great question. And I've been asked that numerous times. And I'll give you kind of an observation I've had. So I've been with our firm, Raincatcher. I'm a partner and a managing director in the firm, and I've probably taken calls from easily 200 business owners, probably more, who are considering selling. And there was an interesting change. And when they call us, one of the first questions we ask them is, all right, why are you thinking about selling? And there was a kind of sea change that seems to be affiliated with the amazing demarcation in our lives, COVID. So before COVID, the majority of business owners, when asked that question, would say, well, I want to play more golf, or I want to start traveling, or my spouse has a health issue and I need to, take care of him or her, or spend more time with with him or her. They would say, I want to spend time with my grandchildren. I want to do charity work. Those were typical answers. But post-COVID, a lot of these business owners, and it still exists today, we don't hear it quite as much, but they're just tired. They would often say, in often quite vitriolic terms, which I won't repeat on your podcast, but this is how they would talk to us. They were just frustrated to the bitter end because they couldn't find people to hire, or they would hire somebody and that individual would ghost them and never show up for work, or they would show up for a week and then ghost them and never show up again. And the frustration these owners have from that is oftentimes pretty intense. And many of them have told me that they feel handcuffed because they're in a position where their business could grow 10, 20%, some even more, but they can't find the employees to go to work for them, especially at a construction industry client who had huge demand once this federal infrastructure bill came out. And he could have put on a whole new crew of about 12 or 13 individuals and expanded his business by 20%. And this was a $28 million company. Couldn't find him. So there's a lot of frustration around that. Then we went through the supply chain issues, and coupled with the supply chain issues were uncontrollable price increases that these people had to deal with. And many of them didn't have the sophisticated tracking systems, purchasing systems, or accounting systems to keep up with the increases they were getting hit with, and they saw significant drops in their profitability and their profit margins. Or they had to ramp up inventory excessively in order to protect against these supply chain shortages. And then they had to jam through their own price increases. And it's just tired a lot of them out. And they've just kind of reached a point where say, it's time for me to kind of move on. Now we still do here, I want to play with the grandkids or offer, et cetera, but the show has dropped pretty substantially.
So I'm noticing a common theme. It seems like a lot when it comes to everything from the being prepared, from the psychological aspect to the knowing when it's time, and being able to convey that to a potential buyer. It seems like a lot of it goes back to having the right accounting practices and balance sheets. And I'm pretty sure it's a lot of companies that have an accountant. Is there nothing that a company, a business owner should look at to what their accountant is doing or not doing to know that the accountant that they're working with is top tier as far as conveying the narrative or the story or accounting for the right things? Have you noticed anything about what are some red flags or green flags for your accountant?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. So there's two ways to handle accounting. One is on what's called a cash basis, and the other is on what's referred to as GAAP, GAAP compliant accrual basis, and with proper detailed expense line items. And again, under the heading of, get an expert if you don't know these things. There's a huge pool of highly experienced and sophisticated fractional CFOs out there that you don't have to bring them on as an employee. You could set them up on a retainer basis or pay them a monthly fee and hire one of those folks and have them come in and help structure your accounting and reporting. And and they can also assess the quality of, if you have any accounting staff as employees, how they're doing, what they were doing, or restructure some of that, or help find an outside accounting or bookkeeping firm. And then if you retain them on an ongoing basis, they can spend limited amount of time overseeing that reporting to help give you comfort and make sure that the financials are being reported in a way that a buyer is going to want to see those. So that's the safest way to do that.
Yeah, and I know that's a shock to a lot of people because definitely cash accounting is much simpler, cash in, cash out. But a lot of people don't know that the accrual way of accounting is what a lot of banks and potential buyers prefer to see. Is that usually a shock for the people that you work with?
Yeah, it quite often is. And we have to ask some companies to hold off on going to market to sell their business and go to an outside accounting firm and have their financials restructured on a GAAP basis. And one of the reasons is on a cash basis, you're right, it's cash in, cash out, but it's not correlated with the cost of your manufacturing materials, your cost of goods, as it's referred to, and tied to the revenue affiliated with that. So buyers want to see what the gross margin percentage is on a business. And that's one of those criteria that's a make it or break it. So every industry has sort of a standard gross margin percentage. And if you're running a company that's at that percentage, then you're in good shape. If you're above it, you're generally in even shape. But if you're below it, and that rule a lot of buyers if you're below the average on your gross margin percentage.
My second to last question, Cameron, because you definitely provided a lot of knowledge and food for thought. Second to last question. All right, I got a good accountant. I'm psychologically ready. Now is the time. But a business broker just called me. A mergers and acquisition specialist just called me. An investment banker just called me. Are those terms interchangeable? Do all three of those titles have the same skill set? Or one is more appropriate for the other, depending on the situation?
In some cases, yes, they can have the same skill set, but generally an investment banker is going to have a more sophisticated approach. But I would say also a wise thing for these business owners, if someone approaches you about buying your business, and again, you don't have an auction price can really validate what your company's worth, you're not going to know if you're getting top dollar. And it usually means that if there's a lot more of them out there. And unless you need a quick sale, you're far better off maximizing value of the deal by hiring a professional and doing a whole market process to sell your company.
Got it. And my last question. Is there nothing that separates Raincatcher from the other companies doing what you do? What would you say is your differentiator?
Well, the differentiator for our firm, again, is a lower middle market investment bank. We bring downstream the knowledge and skills and tactics of the big investment banks. We put out very professional marketing materials. And there are some investment bankers or brokers, well, they'll get you signed up to represent you, they'll find you a buyer, and then they kind of wash their hands until the deal closes. But we hold our clients' hands from beginning to end in that process. And that's a level of service that a lot of banks don't provide for their sell-side clients.
Oh, yeah, man. I was recently, I think a lot of people have heard the term idiot and imbecile, right? And usually today, when you think about the term idiot and imbecile, and then you look up the definition, it usually means stupid, right? But I'm one of those people where I like to look at go deep into the origin of the word. And I determined that the original word for idiot meant a private person, right? As opposed to a public citizen, a private person. And then I looked at the original definition of the word imbecile, and it meant a person without supporting staff. Please, one more time, just let people know who you are, what do you do, and how they can get in contact.
You can be reached at cameron.bishop@raincatcher.com, or you could go to our on LinkedIn at Cameron Bishop.
I appreciate it, Cameron. And if you are looking for any speaking engagements, please let me know. I do a monthly event here in Jacksonville, Florida for business owners, investors, affluent retirees. We would love to have you come and speak to our audience. This has been another episode of the Entreprenudist podcast, a place to hear real entrepreneurs and business owners bear it all. Make sure you visit Cameron Bishop and his crew at raincatcher.com, RAINCATCHER.com. Have an amazing day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.